Welcome everybody to the mid-October market update for Index Fresh. We've been doing these on a monthly basis, getting together and doing these Zoom meetings now. I think this is probably our fourth or fifth one so far, and I think that they've become a valuable part of our grower communications platform that will likely continue even after we get past this social distancing period that we've been in for so long now. It's mid-October now. We are wrapping up the season over the next few weeks. This is, as Andy and I were commenting a little bit ago, this is a later season, later harvest than we've been used to the last 8 or 10 years. But it's not necessarily late by historical standards. I remember there was a number of years when we would, before the imports were so large, where in the big seasons of California, that we would carry out through October into November, which is technically the next fiscal year, and that there were even a number of years where we would be harvesting old crop and new crop at the same time. That's not going to happen this year. We should be wrapping up over the next 2 weeks or so. We should have all the fruit in the barn from the last holdout areas in Carpinteria and San Luis Obispo County, and a couple isolated pockets in Ventura County. Suffice it to say, the market has not rebounded like we hoped when we originally talked about this strategy of extending the season. The strategy of extending the season was kind of twofold. A, to take some of the pressure off of the peak weeks back in the summertime in June, July, August. And there was also an expectation that the market would improve as we got into the fall, that you would have a little bit less competition. So in the peak of the summertime, we had as many as 9 sources of avocados coming into the market. And the idea was that by the end of September, early October, a lot of those would be gone. So there would be no more avocados coming out of the southern growing districts in California, nothing coming from Peru, nothing coming from Colombia. Mexico would be down to just one product, the new crop. There would not be an overlap of old crop and new crop that we did see back in July and the early part of August. All that is true, but nevertheless, the market has not rebounded. So even though there's less noise from fewer countries of origin or sources, the market has not rebounded, and that's been a disappointment. California, the diehard customers are sticking with California. We're now down to less than 500 bins per day coming in for the field. So it looks like the entire industry will be wrapping up over the next 2 to 3 weeks. And the vast majority of the fruit that's coming in is being sold on the West Coast. If you drew a line from Phoenix up to Seattle, almost all the fruit is being sold to the left of that line. What are some of the things that we're doing at Index Fresh to keep that fruit flowing? We've been doing some really creative outreaches to some of our key customers in a similar format in what we're doing here. So the sales team has been calling it In the Grove, where they've been doing some meetings with customers in a grove-like setting over the internet, talking to them about you looking at the fruit, looking at next year's fruit, and trying to in these days where we cannot do the one-on-one meetings with the customers, in their offices, trying to bring the customers out to the grove. And that's had some really good feedback from the from a lot of the people that, you know, they don't want to they want to minimize the in-person meetings, but it's been something creative that we've been able to get in front of them and show them where the avocados that we work with come from. Yesterday we had Sophia, who heads our marketing department, spent some time in Ventura and Santa Barbara counties, getting some videos and some still footage for some continued outreach for the sales team. So we're really excited about Sophia's efforts and the sales team's efforts to keep California avocados front and center in as many customers' minds as we possibly can. Another thing that we're trying to get everybody prepared for is later this month, on October 27th, we are going to be doing our next grower seminar. This is going to be a virtual seminar. It'll be our first attempt at that. And we're going to be doing it on two different subjects. We're going to be doing it on overhead irrigation for cooling and some grower interviews on some of the cultural outreach that we have done and how they've applied it on their farms. So the first one is really interesting to me. You know, I grew up in this business, and freezes were always a big threat for avocado business in California, and they still are. So I grew up with wind machines and smudge pots, but for the last 5 or 7 years, freeze has not been a big threat in California. But over the last 3 years, we have had 2 significant heat events that have done more damage to California grows than the cold has. So we're going to bring in a couple of gentlemen to talk about overhead irrigation as a means of climate control in the grove to cool the grove off during those extreme heat events, which is a different type of climate control than in avocados than I grew up with, but nevertheless, it's very important. The other one that I'm really excited about are some of these grower interviews about what they have learned at some of the cultural seminars that we've put on for the last 5 or 6 years, both in the lecture format and in the agronomist outreach that we do with Gerardo, and really talk about how they've changed some of their farming practices as a direct result of those, and more importantly, the results that they're seeing because of that. So it should be a very, very interesting meeting that we're putting together for October 27th. And I'd like to thank Keith and his team for doing all the heavy lifting on putting those interviews together. The California estimate is out. The first draft of the California estimate is out for next year's crop. It's coming in at 333 million pounds, which is a healthy crop. It's about 12% smaller than this year, but it's I'll take that any day. That's a lot healthier than the 30 or 40% alternate bearing swings that we can see in California. This number is coming in post heat wave, so this is taking into consideration any damage that was done over the heat wave that we had about 4 weeks ago. We all know that there is a lot of winter to get through yet, but I think that 333 million pounds is a good base from which to start for the 2021 crop. Our organic avocado business is continuing along. We're doing the same amount of work to keep those guys in for the next 3 weeks or so, and it's going to be a nice synchronous visit between end to the season at the same time for both our conventional fruit and our organic fruit. So I'd like to thank all of the growers and the field staff for helping to make that a smooth transition and allow us to finish both products at the same time. That's been very, very helpful for sales. The California Avocado Commission came up with an interesting study showing some of the results of their effort, and it was a pricing study of FOBs for California fruit versus some of the imports. And you know, with as hard as the market has been this summer, this COVID market, it's been very good to have the California Avocado Commission out there working as an advocate for California growers, and they've got some studies to show that those efforts have been well done, and the California avocados, no matter how hard it has been for the growers this year, that we were able to achieve a premium over the imported fruit. So I talked a little bit about how the market is not rebounding like we would have liked, and what are some of the reasons for that. The first one, and is a one that the impact really can't be overstated, is the effect that the pandemic has had on demand, and it's really been profound. And I go back to where the market was back in February, which is before all this hit, and we were moving over 50 million pounds per week as an industry in the $40 to $50 price range. And let's contrast that to, and that was in the dead of winter. Let's contrast that to where we are now. Weekly movement is down about 15% versus where it was in the winter. Again, that was after Super Bowl. So we're only, as an industry, we're only selling about 46 or 47 million pounds per week right now. And pricing is down about 40% versus where it was in the wintertime. So if it was in the high $40, low $50 range at the end of February, today we're in the mid to high $20 range on California fruit. So demand is down 15% and pricing is down another 30 or 40%. So that it's a big impact on the demand side of the equation. On the supply side of the equation, there are a couple of things going on that is also adding to some of the weakness in the market. So the last few years, since 2016 actually, demand has been exceeding supply for most of the year. So Mexico had a huge crop in the 2015-2016 cycle. Prices were kind of in the range where we're at now. But that opened up a lot of new users of avocados in the U.S. market. And then when Mexico reduced their supply, the market skyrocketed, and we've been living off of that for the last 4.5 seasons. But over those 4.5 seasons, the Mexican supply has not significantly increased. They've been moving about 2 billion pounds now for 5 consecutive years, and just really haven't been able to separate their supply from that 2 billion pound threshold that they crossed 5 years ago. They've been adding acreage each year, approved acreage into the U.S. market program, but that increased acreage has not been able to duplicate the super crop that they had in 2015, 2016 until now. This year, depending on who you talk to, there's a couple different sources. One is APAM and the other one is Mahia. One of them is projecting about 10% more fruit on tree in Mexico than last year. The other one is about 20% more fruit on tree than this year. So you've got the weakened demand situation that I described earlier, and you've got a higher supply side of the equation as well. In addition to just the gross supply available out of Mexico, you also have a grower profile in these early months of the season where the growers tend to be smaller and they tend to be in warmer areas. So they don't necessarily have the deep pockets to play the market, and the weather doesn't work for them either. They're in warmer areas where they kind of have to have the fruit off by the end of the year. They don't have the luxury of being able to hold that fruit into the spring or summertime and gamble. Now, when we get to the higher altitudes, those growers do like to gamble and hold out longer. But in the early seasons, when the lower altitude groves are in the market, they don't necessarily have that luxury. So it's a little different grower psychology, if you will, this year. And that's what's made it really difficult to see the market gains that we expected in this season, and the market gains that we have seen at this time of year in the previous 3 or 4 seasons. Mexico right now, to put it in terms, is picking for less than $1 per kilo at the farm gate. And that $1 per kilo has been a threshold below which they haven't liked to pick for export ever since the U.S. market opened. So back in 1997, when the U.S. market opened, they kind of established as a threshold that $1 per kilo premium that they wanted to get on the export market, and have always been reluctant to pick when it's been below that, but they're doing so now. And that just kind of tells us both how much demand has been affected here, and that they do have an increased supply down there. Index continues to coordinate a lot with the California Avocado Commission, and we're very appreciative for the coordination that they've done with us, and that's been doing it at all 3 levels. So we're working to keep California avocados front and center at retail, at food service, and working with them on some of the social media projects as well. So we're very appreciative of that. For all of you that have gotten a copy of the In the Grove magazine from CAC this month, I think it's a very, very interesting read. They included in there a little update on the California industry done by a group from France, of all places, named CRAD. And I forget what the acronym for CRAD is, but it's basically a French agency that specializes in tropical agriculture. And they've been putting together these avocado reports for a number of years. They do a weekly one for the European market, and they've been doing country highlight reports for a number of years, and they do really, really good research. I've read some of the other ones, and they dig pretty deep down. And this time they dug into California, and they got a lot of things right. They called out, some of the production trends moving from the south to the north. They called out some of the issues that we have with water and labor, and just did a really good in-depth study of the California Avocado Commission, at least as a snapshot as it was in 2019. One part of their study that really jumped out at me, that they actually dedicated 2 or 3 paragraphs, almost a half page of this spread, to the stark difference that they saw in their visit. And their visit maybe it lasted a week and a half here in California, but they saw a huge difference within our industry between what they called highly traditional avocado farms alongside high-tech avocado farms. And I thought that was interesting for them to pick up on. So they were on the highly traditional avocado farms. They were talking about the size of the trees, the age of the trees, the tree density, the irrigation styles as kind of a 20th century avocado farming, if you will, and then recognized how many of the growers are using new rootstocks, high density berms, new irrigation practices, and kind of the higher tech avocado farming. So I was encouraged to see that they picked up on that in their visit to us. And I think that, that what we're trying to do through our cultural seminars and through our outreach with Gerardo is really drive home that message that we can make avocado farming competitive in California. And is labor expensive? Yes. Is water expensive? Yes. But if there are some techniques to minimize the alternate bearing, increase the per acre productivity, and that California can be can remain a competitive avocado source for years to come. And I'd encourage everybody to continue to attend our seminars. We're going to reach out to your field staff to start talking about Gerardo's next visit. I think we're going to have to do another virtual round of outreach, but I believe we can drive some benefits out of that. And again, we're going to I encourage everybody to get together on our next seminar on October 27th. That kind of brings me to the end of the ideas that I had prepared. Are there any questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
This is Andy.
Hey, Andy.
On gems, what do you anticipate in the way of production with the gem fruit for next year? And are you seeing any significant increase in new plantings?
I haven't gone back to see what to tease out our crop estimate next year for gems. Based on the acreage, we do anticipate an increase next year, and to be honest, an increase for the next several years. So that's really why we've put so much effort into the gems, because we know that the fruit is coming, and we're trying to get out in front of it with carving out a space with a separate identity within the avocado category, and because we know that there's going to be growth. I look back at some of the numbers. I think, if I remember right, lamb has peaked at about 20 million pounds about 6 or 8 years ago. But if we do the extrapolation on the gems over the next several years, we're going to get up to where lambs were, and if they're successful, which we have every intention for them to be, especially when you look at the per acre productivity, that they appear to have a longer window than lambs do, and they've got a couple other positive benefits that I think are superior to lambs. We're going to continue to put the efforts into carving out gem as a separate identity to build on the avocado category. So never to take away anything from Hass. Hass is a great variety with a lot of positive attributes. But what we think that there's a good opportunity. This COVID market was a little disappointing for us, but we think that there is room and interest now in the marketplace for something a little bit different, and that the gems can offer that. We don't have an exact crop estimate for next year. We're still working on our own. CAC kind of beat us to it on putting out their California numbers. We should have that for our next meeting. And we're also gonna be looking at the seasonality of it, because up till now we've been trying to do it in the late spring before the summer rush, and we know that we're not gonna have that luxury to be able to choose that small of a window in the future. So we'll be working with our marketing team to see how the gem program will expand as more acreage comes online.
Okay, thank you.
see any other questions or in written, anything on the chat side?
Nothing in
No.
chat.
Okay.
Nothing on the chat questions, Giovanni.
Okay, well, if there's no further questions, I want to thank everybody for participating. I hope to
I have one question.
see you all. Oh, is there one more?
Yeah. Just, do you have any sense of what the breakdown is for sales right now between retail and food service, as opposed to what that normally? I mean, is that the hole in the wall right now, or the hole in the floor, I should say, not the wall, perhaps, or is it something else?
I can get that for you, Ivor. I'll talk to the sales team right now and try and get a feel for what the split is between retail and food service. I'm not sure if I understand the allegory of the floor in the wall.
Well, the demand, that's where the demand's, you talk about how we're only moving, 40 some million pounds as opposed to we were moving 50 easily before. Is it the food service that is just not there, or the demand from food service that's not there? Or is it retail also isn't doing what it needs to do?
My interpretation, my guess, and I don't have any research for this, but for me, Ivor, it feels like it's a little bit of both. So, on the presidential or vice presidential debates earlier this season, one of the candidates said that 1 in 5 businesses is closed during this pandemic. I don't know if that number is correct, but we know that the restaurant business has been severely hit across the country. So that's one part. The other one that we saw is I think people are watching their pennies much more closely than they have the last few years. So it seemed like when the government aid checks dried up, those $600 a week checks dried up, I think that was the end of July, 1st of August, we felt a change in the velocity of sales at that time. So I think it's a combination of both. People are eating out less. There's fewer restaurants open to pull the fruit through that avenue. But I also think that the high unemployment and people has had an effect. And I think people are watching their pennies much more closely and maybe focusing, more on beans and rice and less on champagne and caviar.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'll just chime in here. What we're hearing from the trade is that the retail stores are down 5 to 10%. This year over this week last year, and then food service seems to be down somewhere in the 30% range.
Yeah.
So pretty significant hits.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. And that's different than the boom we saw in the retail side in April and May, right? So we saw an initial increase in retail demand, and since then that it sounds like that subsided.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing you on October 27th and for the cultural seminar, and then we'll do another one of these in November.